Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm gonna talk to you about a couple of watercolor techniques that may be very helpful for beginner artists but as well for experienced artists. And we're gonna see the wet on wet technique and the wet on dry technique. So first of all, wet on wet means layering some color on a wet surface and can be, like in this case, just plain water, so watering your canvas or your piece of paper and then dropping in color, which is wet of course, so the two layers of wet, and this will create a very whimsical, very fuzzy type of effect, really nice if you are painting a sky, for example. Another iteration of this wet on wet technique is layering a wet color on the top of an already existing wet color. And this is very effective for layering colors on the top of each other and creating beautiful shadows and beautiful shades of different colors. As you can see here, from this bright yellow and bright red, we get some beautiful oranges and some beautiful dark yellows, which is quite interesting when you are creating some sort of nice melt together painting. The dry on wet, or better, the wet on dry, is layering a wet color on the top of a dry surface, in this case paper, and you can see how defined the lines are. But as well, you can layer a wet color on the top of an already existing dry color, and here the color mix trying to imitate this image or experiment with another painting. Please keep your line quite light and remember to be very loose with your drawing. We don't want a paint by number type of situation. Here I'm starting my first layer with the first technique of wet paint on dry paper. And I like to start my paintings like this because it gives it a little bit of definition to the base color. The color I'm using today are the Jackson's Art Watercolor, and I reviewed this palette profusely in a couple of videos, so please check them out. The links are below in the description. The paint that I'm using are yellow ochre, burnt sienna, burnt umber, warm sepia, and a little bit of Payenne gray as well. So, as per usual, a very limited palette. I'm not going to speed up too much this paint along, so you can actually see where the brush strokes goes and how much water I put in my drawing, in my painting. I try to keep the first layer very wet to get in on my second layer of paint with the wet on wet technique, of course. When the yellow ochre is all down and I had an idea where the lights are going and where the shadows are, I start going in with a little bit of burnt umber in their pure form. I don't want to mix the colors too much, as they are pretty similar colors, might create then a little bit of confusion. So using the wet on wet technique, I let the color mix together on the paper for themselves and do their magic there. A quick thing that I want to highlight here is you can see there are many white spaces, and I do like to keep my white spaces quite clear. This will give your watercolor painting a nice kind of unfinished effect, which is very helpful if you, like me, are someone that tends to overwork your paintings. If I don't need to use the wet on wet technique and I want more definition on my paintings, I like to let the paint fully dry on my paper. And to do so, I have to say and to admit that I use an air dryer. Unfortunately, Ireland is a quite a humid country and takes ages for watercolor to dry. You can see how mixing these two very basic techniques, you actually can get a very nice and very organic result. A point that I want to point out, sorry for the game awards here, is the fur down there. You actually, using the wet on dry technique, you can get pretty defined fur. And then on the very back of the fur lines, you can go in with the wet on wet technique to blend it together. So you maintain the organicity of the painting, but still a little bit of definition to suggest the fur. Suggest is actually a word that, to me at least, applies a lot to watercolor. Watercolors are different from oil or acrylics or gouache, in my opinion, of course, as you're not really painting every single details of your image, but you are suggesting. You're just putting down layers of paint and brush strokes that suggest the shapes. It's like, in my mind, the difference between a novel, a romance, and a poem, where in the novel the author describes the situation, the scene, the particular, what the people are wearing, what the hair smell like, and so on and so forth, giving you greater amount of details, while the poem is a very fuzzy idea of what the entire situation is. But in both scenarios, you can get a full picture of what's happening or what's going on, what is the idea of the author. So watercolors are like a poem. You just suggest the lines and shapes, and the eye of who is looking at your picture is tricked to put together the image and get the image clear and sound in the mind of who's looking at the picture. If I remember well, this is called the theory of the Gestalt, which is a psychological theory, very, very famous. So look it up if you're interested. To see the results. And if you like this video, again, please give it a thumbs up, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel. This will massively help this teeny tiny little channel to have some sort of visibility. And I'll see you very soon. Slán!